My husband's late nights and strange excuses led me to believe he was having an affair, but the truth, revealed by 3 cryptic words on his phone, was infinitely more terrifying. The silence in our house used to be comfortable. It was the easy, settled quiet of 2 people who had known each other for a decade, who could communicate with a glance, who didn't need to fill every moment with noise. Now, the silence was a living thing. It was heavy, suffocating, and full of unspoken questions. It had started 6 months ago, a slow poisoning of the air we breathed. It began with the late nights Mark claimed were for work, the faint, unfamiliar scent of perfume on his collar that he brushed off as someone at the office, and the way his phone, once left casually on the kitchen counter, was now permanently attached to his hand, screen down. At first I told myself I was being paranoid. We were happy, weren't we? Mark was the man who still brought me coffee in bed every morning, who remembered the anniversary of our first date, who could make me laugh until my sides ached. Cheating was something that happened to other people, to characters in movies, not to us. But the little inconsistencies piled up, forming a mountain of doubt I could no longer ignore. There was the credit card bill with a charge for a 5-star hotel restaurant on a night he swore he was eating takeout at his desk. There was the business trip to Chicago that a friend, who actually lives in Chicago, confirmed never happened, at least not with his company. Each lie was a small paper cut, insignificant on its own, but together they were leaving me to bleed out. I tried to talk to him, to gently probe. "You seem stressed lately, honey. Is everything okay at work?" He would just smile that disarming smile of his, the one that used to make my heart flutter, and say, "Just a big project, babe. It'll be over soon. Don't you worry about a thing." But his eyes wouldn't meet mine. They would skate over my shoulder, looking at something far away, something I wasn't allowed to see. The man I married was disappearing, replaced by a polite, secretive stranger who wore his face. The breaking point came 3 weeks ago. He was in the shower, and his phone, left for a rare moment on the nightstand, buzzed. It was a single text from a number with no name. I know I shouldn't have looked. It was a violation of trust, a line I had never crossed in our entire marriage. But my own sanity was fraying, and I needed something, anything, to prove I wasn't just going crazy. My hands were trembling as I picked it up. The message was just 3 words: "Package delivered as planned." My blood ran cold. Package? What package? It sounded so sterile, so clandestine. Before I could process it, the sound of the shower turning off jolted me back to reality. I dropped the phone back on the nightstand just as he walked out of the bathroom, a towel around his waist. He glanced at the phone, then at me. A flicker of something suspicion? Anger? Crossed his face before it was gone, replaced by that same empty smile. "Everything okay?" he asked. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay beside him, listening to his steady breathing, and felt a chasm opening between us. This wasn't just about another woman anymore. Package delivered. It sounded like something out of a spy thriller, not a message to a suburban architect. My mind raced through horrifying possibilities. Was he in debt? Was he mixed up in something illegal? The not knowing was eating me alive. The next morning, with dark circles under my eyes and a hollow feeling in my chest, I did something I never thought I'd do. I opened my laptop and typed "Private Investigator City Name" into the search bar. I met him in a quiet, dimly lit coffee shop downtown. His name was Mr. Davies, a former cop with tired eyes that seemed to see right through my carefully constructed composure. I felt a wave of shame as I handed him a photo of Mark and me from our last vacation. A picture where we were both smiling, looking like the perfect happy couple. I told him everything, the late nights, the lies, the weird text message. I felt pathetic, like a cliché. He listened patiently, without judgment, jotting down notes in a small black book. When I was done, he looked at me and said in a calm, gravelly voice, "You did the right thing. It's better to know the truth, no matter what it is." His confidence was a small, steadying anchor in my swirling sea of fear and doubt. For the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. I was the loving, supportive wife to Mark's face, making his favorite dinners, asking about his day, and pretending not to notice the growing distance between us. But inside, I was a nervous wreck, my stomach in knots every time my phone buzzed, hoping and dreading it would be Mr. Davies. I started noticing things I'd missed before. A second prepaid phone tucked away in his gym bag, cash withdrawals for large, unaccounted-for sums of money. The man I was living with was a ghost, and I was just haunting the house with him. Then, this afternoon, the email arrived. The subject line was simple: Initial Findings. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it would break through. Mark was out, supposedly at a hardware store. I had the house to myself. With a trembling finger, I clicked open the email. There were no long paragraphs, no detailed report. There was just one attachment, a single photograph. I clicked on it, and the image filled my screen. My breath hitched in my throat. It was Mark, but he wasn't with another woman. He was standing on a grimy, industrial-looking street, the kind of place you see in movies right before a deal goes wrong. And he was handing a thick brown manila envelope to a man with a scarred face and a cold, predatory look in his eyes. The man looked dangerous. My Mark, my gentle, kind Mark, who was afraid of spiders and cried during sad movies, was handing a mysterious package to a man who looked like he could snap a person in two without a second thought. My world tilted on its axis. This was so much worse than an affair. What had he gotten himself into? My blood ran cold. I heard the front door open. "Honey, I'm home!" Mark called out, his voice cheerful, normal. I heard his footsteps on the hardwood floor coming down the hall, coming towards me, and the damning photo glowing on my laptop screen. My reaction was pure instinct, a primal need to hide the truth, to shield myself from the collision course we were on. I slammed the laptop shut with a crack that echoed in the sudden, sharp silence. The screen went black an instant before Mark rounded the corner into the living room, a plastic bag from the hardware store swinging from his hand. He stopped, a carefully constructed smile on his face that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Whoa, what was that?" he asked, his tone light, conversational. He gestured with the bag towards my laptop. "Sounded like you were trying to kill it." I forced a laugh that came out as a strangled gasp. "Sorry, it froze. You know how frustrating they can be." My voice was thin, reedy, a terrible lie from a terrible liar. He didn't move. He just stood there, studying me. The seconds stretched out, each one a taut wire of tension. His gaze flickered from my face to the closed laptop, then back again. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, the frantic thump of my pulse in my neck. He knew. He didn't know what I saw, but he knew something was wrong. His smile tightened. "Well, I got the extra strong sealant for the shower grout. Should finally fix that little leak." He said it with the manufactured enthusiasm of a man desperately trying to pretend everything was normal. He was playing the part of the devoted husband doing weekend chores, and he needed me to play my part too. I nodded, unable to form words. He finally moved past me into the kitchen, the crinkling of the plastic bag unnaturally loud. "Want some tea?" he called out. "You look a little pale." I stayed frozen on the couch, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles were white. The image from the screen was burned onto the back of my eyelids. Mark, my Mark, with that dangerous, scarred man, the manila envelope passing between them like some unholy sacrament. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a different world, a dark and violent world, and my husband was a citizen of it. Later, after a dinner eaten in near silence, with Mark making pointless small talk about work and me offering non-committal hums in response, I excused myself to the bathroom. I locked the door, my back pressing against the cool wood, and pulled out my phone. I emailed Mr. Davies. I need to know who that man was, the one in the photo. I need to know everything. I showered, letting the hot water sluice over me, hoping it could wash away the filth of the day. the grime of the lies that now coated our lives. When I came back to the bedroom, Mark was already in bed, pretending to be asleep. I could tell by the rigid set of his shoulders, the unnaturally even rhythm of his breathing. We lay there for hours, two strangers in the dark, separated by a galaxy of secrets. Just after 2 a.m., my phone buzzed silently on the nightstand. It was the reply from Davies. I crept out of bed and back into the bathroom, closing the door as quietly as I could. The email was short and chilling. The man's name is Ivan Koslov. He's a known enforcer for the Bratva, specifically a Vori Zakone named Anton Petrov. These are not people you play games with. They are involved in money laundering, extortion, loan sharking. Whatever your husband is doing, he is in deep. I advise extreme caution. My fee for this information is included in the invoice. My advice is free. Be careful who you trust. Bratva, Russian mafia. The words seemed to jump off the screen, foreign and terrifying. I felt a wave of nausea so profound I had to grip the sink to keep from collapsing. This wasn't just illegal, this was life or death. My Mark, who read historical fiction and got flustered when he had to complain about a cold meal at a restaurant, was entangled with the Russian mob. The pieces started to click into place with horrifying clarity. The secret phone, the large cash withdrawals. The package wasn't a gift for a mistress. It was a payment or a drop or something infinitely more sinister. My fear curdled into a cold, hard resolve. I couldn't live like this. I couldn't live with this stranger. I needed proof. Something tangible. Something I could hold in my hand that would make all of this undeniably real. I thought of his home office, the one room in the house that was always kept locked. He claimed it was because of sensitive architectural plans, but I knew now that was another lie. He kept the spare key in a hollowed-out book titled The Master Builders of Florence on the living room bookshelf. He'd given it to me for our 3rd anniversary. The irony tasted like ash in my mouth. With movements that felt both frantic and slow, I slipped out of the bathroom, grabbed the book, and retrieved the key. The lock on his office door turned with an oily, almost silent click. The room was dark, smelling faintly of him, his aftershave and the coffee he always had at his desk. I didn't turn on the light, using only the glow from my phone to see. His desk was immaculate. His files were perfectly organized. There was nothing out of place. It was the sterile office of a man with nothing to hide, which only made me more certain that he was hiding everything. I ran my hands under the desk, along the shelves, tapping the walls. Nothing. I was about to give up when my foot snagged on the edge of the rug. As I straightened it, I noticed it. A single floorboard just beneath his desk chair was a slightly different shade than the others. Its grain ran in a subtly different direction. My heart leaped into my throat. I knelt down, my fingers searching for a seam. I found a tiny notch and used my fingernail to pry it up. The board lifted easily, and there, nestled in the dark space below, was a small black metal safe. My hands shook as I tried the keypad. Our anniversary. No, his birthday. No, my birthday. No. I thought I was defeated. Then a memory surfaced, a date he always called our real beginning. The day we first met, 10/23. I typed in the 4 digits, a soft beep, and the lock clicked open. I pulled the heavy door towards me, my breath held tight in my chest. Inside, it was worse than I could have ever imagined. Stacks of $100 bills bound in rubber bands. 2 fake passports with our pictures, but with the names William and Sarah Stone. And tucked in the corner, nestled against the cold steel, was a small, black handgun. The world went silent, and the air left my lungs. The gun was so heavy, so dense, so utterly and terrifyingly real. As I stared at it, a shadow fell over the safe. I felt a presence behind me, a sudden drop in the room's temperature. The soft click of the office door closing sealed my fate. I spun around, my heart seizing in my chest. Mark was standing there, his face illuminated only by the pale light of my phone. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't angry. He looked broken. His eyes were filled with a profound sadness as he looked from the open safe to the gun to my terrified face. He took a slow step forward, his hands held up in a placating gesture. "I did this for us," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Everything. It was all to keep you safe." He stopped, just an arm's length away, his gaze boring into mine, pleading. "Do you trust me?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy and toxic. "Do you trust me?" It was a question he had asked 1,000 times before, in 1,000 different contexts. "Do you trust me to hang this picture straight? Do you trust me to pick the right wine? Do you trust me with your heart?" I had always answered yes without hesitation. Now, the words caught in my throat, strangled by the sight of the gun, the fake passports, the mountain of cash. The man standing before me, looking so lost and pleading, was a complete stranger. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady, my eyes locked on his. The glow from my phone cast long, dancing shadows on the walls, turning the familiar lines of his face into a grotesque mask. "I trust the private eye," I replied, my voice a low, trembling whisper that still managed to cut through the silence like a shard of glass. His face crumbled. It wasn't anger or shock that I saw, but a deep, gut-wrenching despair. It was the look of a man who had built a fortress of lies, only to watch the one person he was trying to protect tear it down stone by stone. "You hired someone," he breathed, the words more of a realization than a question. "Oh, Sarah." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized as a sign of extreme stress. "You shouldn't have done that. You have no idea what you've just done." "What I've done?" My voice rose, fueled by months of suspicion and a fresh surge of terror. "Mark, there's a gun in this safe and fake passports. You're meeting with mob enforcers in alleyways. What in God's name am I supposed to think?" I gestured wildly at the open safe, the evidence of his secret life laid bare on the floor. "It's not what it looks like," he insisted, taking another step closer. "It's complicated. I was going to tell you, I swear. I was just waiting for the right time." "The right time? When, Mark? When we were on the run using these?" I kicked at one of the passports with my foot. "When William and Sarah Stone were starting a new life in some country with no extradition treaty. You're laundering money for the Bratva, aren't you?" The words, spoken aloud, sounded insane, like a line from a bad movie. But Mr. Davies' email was seared into my brain. Ivan Koslov, enforcer, Vori, Vzakoni. Mark flinched as if I'd slapped him. "No, God, no, it's not like that." He finally looked away from me, his gaze falling on the contents of the safe. "My father," he said, his voice barely audible. "It's about my father." I stared at him, bewildered. His father had died 5 years ago, a sudden, massive heart attack. We had grieved together, held each other through the funeral. "Your father? What does he have to do with any of this?" Mark sank down onto the edge of his desk, burying his face in his hands. "He didn't have a heart attack, Sarah. That's what I told you. It's what I told everyone." He looked up, his eyes raw with a pain I'd never seen before. He had debts, gambling debts, to very, very bad people. When he couldn't pay, they made an example of him. They staged it to look natural. The coroner was on their payroll. I only found out about it 6 months ago when they came to me. My mind reeled trying to process the information. "They came to you." "Who came to you?" "Petrov's people," he said, confirming my worst fears. "They told me my father's debt was now my debt, with interest. A lot of interest. They said if I didn't pay, what happened to him would look like a mercy compared to what they would do to you." He looked at me then, a desperate, fierce light in his eyes. "They showed me pictures, Sarah, pictures of you, at the grocery store, leaving your office. They had been watching you for weeks. I had no choice." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. I remembered weeks ago that strange feeling of being watched, a prickling on the back of my neck that I had dismissed as paranoia. They had been real. They had been watching me. "So the money," I whispered, gesturing to the safe. "The packages." "I'm not laundering it," he said quickly. "I'm an architect. I work with developers, contractors, permitting officials. Petrov. He uses my business to legitimize his. He invests in my projects with his dirty money. I design the buildings, I oversee the construction, and his clean money comes out the other side. The cash in the safe is my commission, a small price to pay for your safety." His voice was hollow, defeated. "The gun is for protection. The passports are a last resort, an escape plan if things went wrong." He stood up and walked over to me, his movements slow, deliberate. He gently took my hand. His was cold as ice. "It was all to keep you safe, to keep this world away from you. I was paying them off. This last package, the one your PI photographed, that was the final payment. I'm done, Sarah. It's over. I'm free of them." He squeezed my hand, his eyes searching mine. "I'm so sorry I lied. I just couldn't bear to see you scared. I couldn't drag you into this nightmare, but it's over now. We can be us again." For a moment, I almost believed him. I wanted to believe him more than anything. The story was monstrous, but it fit. It explained everything. The lies, the secrecy, the fear in his eyes. He wasn't a monster. He was a man trapped, trying to protect his wife. My anger began to recede, replaced by a wave of pity and a dawning horror at what he must have been going through alone for all these months. But Mr. Davies' words echoed in my head. "Be careful who you trust." "The text message," I said, my voice steadier now. "The one I saw on your phone. Package delivered, as planned." "That doesn't sound like a final payment, Mark. That sounds like part of a process, like a business transaction." A flicker of something not fear, but something else, something I couldn't read, crossed his face. "It's just the language they use. They're criminals, Sarah. They don't talk like normal people. It's over. I promise." He was still holding my hand, his thumb stroking the back of it. The gesture was meant to be comforting, but it suddenly felt cloying, manipulative. He was lying. Maybe not about his father, maybe not about the debt. But he was lying about something. He was hiding one more piece of the puzzle. I could feel it. The perfect, all-encompassing explanation was just a little too perfect. "Okay," I said, pulling my hand away. "Okay, Mark." I took a deep breath, trying to calm the frantic beating of my heart. I needed to think. I needed space. I need some air. Before he could protest, I walked out of the office, down the hall, and through the living room to the back patio. The cool night air was a shock to my system. I stood by the railing, staring out at the dark, manicured lawn, my mind racing. Was he telling the truth? Was it really over? Could we just put the gun and the fake passports back in the safe and pretend none of this ever happened? My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting another message from Mark. But it was an email from Mr. Davies. The subject line was just one word: urgent. My blood turned to ice. I opened it. There was another photo attached. It was a close-up shot, clearly taken with a long-range lens, of the manila envelope from the first picture, the one Mark had handed to Ivan Koslov. In this photo, the flap was slightly ajar, and tucked just inside, I could see the corner of what was inside. It wasn't money, it was a photograph, a family photograph, of a man, a woman, and a small child. And beneath it, scrawled in black marker, was a single word: Target. Mark hadn't just delivered a payment, he had delivered a kill order. The patio lights buzzed softly, casting a sickly yellow glow on the screen in my hand. Target. The word was a black hole, pulling in all the air, all the light, all the hope I had momentarily allowed myself to feel. The family in the photo was smiling, caught in a candid moment of joy, completely unaware that they were now just a name on a list, an objective to be neutralized. And my husband My gentle, kind Mark had been the one to deliver the sentence. His story, so tragically compelling just moments ago, shattered into a million pieces. The debt, his father, the desperate measures to protect me, it was all a beautifully crafted lie, a sympathy-soaked narrative designed to excuse the inexcusable. He wasn't a victim trapped in the mob's web. He was an active participant. He wasn't paying off a debt. He was a contractor of a sort. He designed buildings for them, washed their money, and it seemed, pointed them toward their enemies. The commission in the safe wasn't a price for my safety. It was blood money. A cold, terrifying clarity washed over me. I finally understood the look I had seen in his eyes when I mentioned the text message. It wasn't fear of being caught in a lie. It was the flicker of a predator's focus, recalibrating, assessing the new threat. My breath came in ragged, shallow gasps. The man in the house, the man who was even now probably putting the gun back in its box, was not the man I married. I wasn't even sure that man had ever existed. I was living with a monster who wore my husband's face. I heard the sliding glass door behind me open with a soft hiss. "Sarah, are you okay?" Mark's voice was gentle, laced with concern. It was the same voice he used when I had the flu, the same voice that whispered, "I love you" in the dark. The sound of it now made my skin crawl. I shoved the phone into my pocket and turned, schooling my features into a mask of weary confusion. I couldn't let him see the terror. I couldn't let him know that I knew the real truth. My life and the lives of the smiling family in that photo might depend on my ability to act. "I'm just trying to process all of this," I said, my voice shaky, which wasn't a complete fabrication. "My head is spinning. The mob? Your father? It's like something out of a movie." He stepped onto the patio, closing the distance between us. "I know it's a lot to take in," he said, reaching for me. "I'm so sorry I had to put you through this." I flinched away from his touch, a purely involuntary reaction. "Don't. Please. I need a minute." He stopped, his hand hovering in the air. Hurt flickered across his face. "Of course. Take all the time you need. I'll be inside." He gave me one last searching look before retreating back into the living room, sliding the door almost completely shut behind him, leaving just a crack. He was giving me space, but he was also watching me. My mind raced. I had to get out. I had to warn someone. But who? The police? What would I tell them? That my architect husband is secretly working for the Bratva, and I have a grainy picture from a PI to prove it. They would think I was crazy. They would question Mark. He would deny everything, and then he would know that I had betrayed him. I shuddered to think what would happen then. The gun in the safe wasn't just for protection. It was a tool of his trade. Mr. Davies. He was my only lifeline. He knew what was happening. He had the proof. I fumbled for my phone again, my fingers clumsy with adrenaline. I needed to call him, to tell him what I'd found, what Mark had done. But I couldn't do it here. Mark was watching, listening. I had to get out of the house. I took a few deep, deliberate breaths, trying to appear as if I were calming myself down. Then I walked back to the sliding glass door and opened it. Mark was on the couch, staring at the blank television screen, though I knew he wasn't seeing it. "I think I'm going to go for a drive," I announced, my voice surprisingly steady. "I just need to clear my head, drive around for a little bit." His head snapped up, his eyes narrowed. "A drive? Now? It's almost 3 a.m. "I can't think in here," I said, gesturing vaguely around the room, around our life. "I feel like the walls are closing in. I won't be long. I just need some air that isn't this." He stood up, his posture rigid. "I don't think that's a good idea, Sarah. You're upset. You should stay here with me. We can talk this through." His tone was soft, but the words were a command. "Stay where I can see you." "I don't want to talk, Mark. I want to drive," I insisted, a hard edge creeping into my voice. I walked to the small table by the front door and grabbed my keys. The metallic jingle sounded like an alarm bell in the quiet house. "Sarah, stop," he said, his voice dropping an octave, losing its gentle facade and taking on a chilling authority. He started walking towards me. "You're not going anywhere." Panic, cold and sharp, lanced through me. He was going to stop me. He was going to lock me in, trap me here with him. My escape route was closing. I backed away towards the door, my hand fumbling behind me for the deadbolt. My fingers brushed against the cold metal knob. "Why?" I challenged, trying to buy myself a precious few seconds. "Why can't I go for a drive, Mark? If it's all over, if we're safe now, then what are you so afraid of?" He stopped a few feet away, his face a mask of stone. The illusion of the caring husband was gone, replaced by the cold, calculating man who handed out death sentences. "I'm afraid of you being emotional and doing something stupid, something that could put us both in danger." "Us?" I laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "You mean, put you in danger?" I found the deadbolt, turned it with a loud thunk, and yanked the door open. I didn't wait for his reaction. I bolted out into the night, fumbling with my car keys as I sprinted down the driveway. I heard the front door slam open behind me. "Sarah!" he roared, his voice filled with a fury I had never heard before. It was the voice of a man whose control was slipping, and it terrified me more than anything. I jammed the key into the car door, unlocked it, and threw myself inside, locking the doors just as he reached the driver's side window. He slammed his fist against the glass, the impact making me scream. His face was contorted with rage, a stranger's face. "Open the door, Sarah! Open the goddamn door right now!" My hands were shaking so violently I could barely fit the key in the ignition. He pounded on the glass again, harder this time. I was terrified it would shatter. Finally, the engine roared to life. I threw the car into reverse, not even looking, and stomped on the accelerator. The tires squealed on the pavement as I peeled out of the driveway, the back end fishtailing wildly. I saw him in the rearview mirror, standing in the middle of the street under the lonely glow of a streetlight, watching me go. He wasn't chasing me. He was just watching. I drove. I had no destination, just a desperate need to put as much distance between me and that house as possible. Tears streamed down my face, blurring the streetlights into long, watery streaks. My phone started ringing, Mark's name flashing on the screen. I ignored it. It rang again and again. Finally, I silenced it, tossing it onto the passenger seat. I needed to call Mr. Davies. I needed to tell him everything. I pulled over onto the deserted shoulder of a dark, tree-lined road, my whole body trembling. I picked up the phone to call him, my thumb hovering over his contact. But before I could, a new email notification popped up. It was from Davies. The subject line, "They know." I opened it with a shaking hand. The message was just a few lines. "Your husband just made a call. My source inside Petrov's crew confirmed the subject. He told them you know, that you've become a liability. There's a kill order out on you now, Sarah. Run." My phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattering onto the floor mat. A kill order. On me. The words didn't seem real. I stared into the darkness outside my window, my heart hammering a frantic, panicked rhythm against my ribs. And then I saw it. Far behind me in the pitch black of the road, 2 pinpricks of light appeared. Headlights. They were coming fast, closing the distance with silent, predatory speed. They had found me. For a heartbeat, I was paralyzed. The headlights in my rearview mirror grew larger, brighter, a pair of predators' eyes homing in on their prey. Run! The word from Mr. Davies' email screamed in my head. This wasn't a car coming up behind me. It was the physical manifestation of the kill order Mark had just issued. My world had shrunk to this dark stretch of road and the approaching engine of my own death. Panic gave way to a surge of pure, unadulterated adrenaline. I slammed my foot on the gas, the engine roaring in protest as the car shot forward. My hands, slick with sweat, gripped the steering wheel. I didn't know these roads, not really. They were the winding country lanes on the outskirts of the city, places we drove through on our way to quaint weekend getaways. Now they were a labyrinth, and I was being hunted. The car behind me matched my speed effortlessly. It was a big, dark SUV, the kind that looks menacing even in broad daylight. It filled my entire rear-view mirror, blocking out everything else. They weren't trying to be subtle. They wanted me to know they were there. They wanted me to be afraid. My mind raced, thoughts firing like synapses in a storm. I couldn't outrun them. This wasn't a movie chase scene. This was real life, and they were professionals. I needed a plan. Calling the police was still a risk. What if Petrov had cops on his payroll, like the coroner who'd signed off on Mark's father? My only ally was Mr. Davies. I fumbled for my phone, wedging it between my ear and shoulder as I swerved around a sharp bend. "Davies," he answered on the first ring, his voice calm and steady, a rock in my churning sea of terror. "They're behind me," I yelled, my voice cracking. "A black SUV. They're on my tail." "I know," he said, and the calmness in his voice was suddenly terrifying. "I put a tracker on your car this afternoon when you were at my office. I was worried he'd do something like this. Where are you now?" "I don't know. Turning off Route 7 onto some side road? Maple Creek Road?" "Good. Keep driving. Do not stop. In 2 miles, you'll see a sign for the old Northwood Quarry. Turn in there. Drive to the end of the access road." "The quarry? It's a dead end," I screamed, my panic rising again. "They'll have me trapped." "Just trust me, Sarah," he said, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. "Do exactly as I say. Get to the end of that road." The line went dead. I had no choice. It was a terrifying leap of faith, trusting a man I barely knew over the horrifying certainty of the vehicle behind me. The SUV was getting closer, bumping my rear fender with a loud thud that sent a jolt through my entire body. They were playing with me. I saw the faded graffiti-covered sign for the Northwood Quarry and wrenched the wheel, my tires spitting gravel as I skidded onto the bumpy access road. The path was dark, surrounded by dense woods. The SUV followed without hesitation. This was it. I was driving into my own grave. The road opened up into a wide, flat clearing that ended abruptly at the edge of a massive, dark pit. The quarry. A sheer cliff dropped into blackness. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a halt just feet from the edge. I was trapped. The SUV pulled up behind me, its high beams pinning my car in a blinding glare. The engine cut out. 2 doors opened, and 2 large, dark figures emerged. I could see their silhouettes against the bright lights. Ivan Koslov, the scarred enforcer from the photograph, and another man, equally large. They started walking towards my car, their movements unhurried, confident. My life was about to end here, in this desolate place, because the man I had promised to love, honor, and cherish had deemed me a liability. Suddenly, the night exploded with light. Floodlights from all sides of the clearing blazed to life, illuminating the entire scene in stark, artificial daylight. Ivan and his companion froze, momentarily blinded, throwing their hands up to shield their eyes. And from the shadows of the woods, figures emerged. Men in dark tactical gear, rifles raised. "FBI, drop your weapons! Hands in the air!" A voice boomed through a megaphone. Red and blue lights began to flash, and the quiet clearing was filled with the sound of shouting and the unmistakable racking of shotguns. Ivan and his partner, caught completely off guard, slowly raised their hands. It was over in seconds. They were cuffed and forced to their knees before they could even process what was happening. The driver's side door of a nondescript sedan opened, and Mr. Davies stepped out. He walked calmly over to my car as agents swarmed the 2 mobsters. He tapped on my window. I fumbled with the lock, my hands still shaking, and pushed the door open. "You okay, kid?" he asked, his tired eyes showing the first flicker of a smile I'd ever seen. "What? How?" I stammered, unable to form a coherent thought. "I told you I used to be a cop," he said with a shrug. I still have friends in the bureau. When you sent me that photo of Kozlov, I knew this was bigger than a simple matrimonial case. I made a call. Turns out your husband wasn't just working for Petrov. He was our star witness. I stared at him, my mind refusing to compute. Witness? Mark? For the last 5 months, Davies confirmed. The FBI picked him up when they first connected him to Petrov. They flipped him. Everything he's done since then, the money drops, the meetings, it was all part of a federal sting operation to bring down Petrov's entire organization. The fake passports, the gun, the cash, it was all provided by the feds to make his cover believable. The pieces of the puzzle rearranged themselves in my head, forming a picture that was even more unbelievable than the last one. So, he was working with you? With the FBI? Not with me. He didn't know I existed until tonight. But yes, he was working with them. His story about his father was true. That's how Petrov got his hooks in him. But when the feds offered him a way out, a way to get justice for his father and protect you for good, he took it. He became their inside man. But the kill order, I whispered, the words still tasting like poison. The photo of that family. He ordered a hit. Mr. Davies' face hardened. That was the final piece of the puzzle. The family in that photo is the federal prosecutor assigned to the case, and his wife and child. Petrov wanted them gone before the indictments came down. Mark had to deliver that photo. It was the last bit of evidence the feds needed to prove a conspiracy to commit murder charge, enough to put Petrov away for life. He knew that as soon as he handed it over, the feds would move in and arrest everyone. He was trying to end it. A wave of dizziness washed over me. Mark wasn't a monster. He was a hero, caught in an impossible situation, making an unthinkable choice. But then why did he call them? I asked, my voice trembling. Why did he put a hit on me? Mr. Davies sighed, his gaze softening with something that looked like pity. Because you hired me, Sarah. You brought a private citizen, an unknown variable, into a tightly controlled federal operation. He didn't know who I was. For all he knew, I was working for Petrov, sent to test his loyalty. When you ran, he panicked. He thought his cover was blown and that Petrov's men would be coming for you anyway. He made a calculated, desperate choice. He called Petrov's lieutenant and told them you knew, that you were a liability that needed to be handled. He sacrificed you on paper to save the entire case. He was betting, praying, that the FBI team listening in on the wiretap would get to you before Petrov's men did. It was the only play he had left. I looked past Mr. Davies to where another car was pulling into the clearing. Mark got out of the passenger side, flanked by 2 men in suits. His eyes found mine across the chaotic scene. The relief on his face was so profound, so absolute, that it finally broke through my shock. He took a step towards me, but one of the agents put a hand on his shoulder. Witness protection. This was the end of our life as we knew it. He wasn't a monster. He was just a man who had been dragged into a world of darkness and had done terrible things to protect the one person he loved. He had lied. He had deceived. He had even been willing to let me think he was a killer, all to keep me safe. He had pointed a gun at my head, metaphorically, so that a real one would never touch me. The trust between us was shattered, broken into 1,000 pieces, but looking at him now, I knew that beneath the lies, the core of the man I married was still there. We were no longer William and Sarah Stone, the fake names in a passport, but we weren't Mark and Sarah, the happy suburban couple either. We were something new, something forged in fear and secrets. And as he gave me a small, desperate nod from across the quarry, I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that we would find a way to put the pieces back together.